When you are very stressed, your blood vessels constrict, your blood pressure goes up, your body releases inflammatory molecules, and it literally does accelerate aging. Scientists have recently found out that the old tale of your hair graying based on stress actually is true, that your hair can gray based on stress. And
It's
then
not a
when
myth.
that stress is, it's not a myth. And then reducing that stress can actually then reduce those grays back to having melanin or the color in them again.
If you're finding value in what you're watching, consider hitting the subscribe button and turning on the bell notification. Oh, and don't forget to drop a comment. I love hearing your thoughts and ideas. By the way, we have got a ton of other videos waiting for you. And if you are ready to level up your mindset, come hang out with us in our private Facebook group called Mindset for Business Success. Welcome to Super Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Shahid Durrani. Today we have with us Chris Mirabile. Chris has co-founded multiple lucrative startups, including a commercial real estate tech platform whose first clients possess more than $500 billion in assets. And now he's the founder and CEO of Novos, a human longevity company. Welcome to our show, my friend Chris.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. So why do you think more and more people, especially entrepreneurs like high achievers, they started to pay attention to the idea of slowing down aging? Not the more obvious reasons, but is there anything else that you could share?
Sure. I think first and foremost, many people are starting to come to the realization that scientists have had for more than a decade now, that the number one root cause of chronic illnesses that we see our loved ones contracting, or some of us in certain cases, is aging. So specifically cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all of these diseases, the number one risk factor is aging. Even, for example, lung cancer, where many people would intuitively guess that it's cigarette smoke. It's not. It's aging is the number one cause. And when we see people, our loved ones, or again, even ourselves, being impacted by these diseases, we naturally start to think, what can I do to prevent them? And the medical system and the scientific field that has focused on these individual diseases has not really made much progress over decades of time. And so it's all about now taking a different approach, which is looking at this common denominator of aging. What happens on a biological and molecular cellular level to cause aging in the first place? And then if we can try to slow down those mechanisms that cause the aging process, then we could potentially have an impact on aging in and of itself, and then extend health span, which is the period of life lived without a chronic disease, and then lifespan as a direct result of extending that health span.
You're actually going after 12 root causes. Can you give us a sneak peek on these 12 angles that you're focusing on?
Sure. So like I said, scientists are digging into the aging process and defining what exactly is that at a microscopic level, what is causing aging. And they have defined 12 to date.
Yeah.
Initially, about a decade ago, there was a paper that was a seminal paper called The Hallmarks of Aging. That is when they defined the first 9. At the 10-year anniversary, which was in 2023, they added 3 more to that. And those are the 12 that Novos as a company directly addresses. So what are they? I can just list them off very quickly, and then if there are any that you're curious about, we can talk more about them. But first is mitochondrial dysfunction. Second is cellular senescence. Third is loss of proteostasis. Fourth is altered intercellular communication. Fifth is genomic instability. That's essentially DNA damage. Sixth is epigenetic alteration. So your epigenome is which genes are turned on and off, and that changes as we age. 7 is telomere shortening, the protective end caps of our chromosomes that protect our DNA. 8 is deregulated nutrient sensing. 9 is stem cell exhaustion. 10 is inflammaging, this chronic inflammatory state. 11 is disabled autophagy, the process of recycling cells and its components. And then 12 is dysbiosis. So this is our microbiome not functioning as well as it otherwise would. So all of these, in one way or another, impact each other. So it's this complex web of all of these hallmarks. When one declines, it then tends to lead to others declining. And that's why we see the aging process is also somewhat exponential. Like the amount of aging that we see from a 10-year-old to a 20-year-old to a 30-year-old is not that much. But from 30 to 40, you start to see it accelerate. From 40 to 50, you see it accelerate. 50 to 60, 60 to 70, and so on. Each decade, you can see people aging at an accelerated rate, largely because these different mechanisms are compounding on each other. And it's becoming that much more of an issue for the cells and the organs to function as they were otherwise intended to.
So how about food intake? Any specific food intakes would trigger these 12 to become more hyperactive?
Yes, so it's a good question. So ultimately, your question really revolves around the idea of what are the inputs, what are the lifestyle factors that can lead to an acceleration or potentially even a deceleration of these different mechanisms and thereby the aging process. And so when it comes to food, things like, for example, the foods you eat, the amount of those foods that you eat, and the timing of when you eat those foods all play a role in our cellular health and then ultimately over the long term into the aging process. And scientists have found that the number one, at least to this point, the number one most positive diet you can follow for the sake of aging is the Mediterranean style diet, which has a number of different definitions. You can modify it and have slightly different foods, whether it's Italian Mediterranean or Greek Mediterranean or Turkish Mediterranean. There's different flavors to it, but it has similar foundations in terms of like natural foods, lots of vegetables and mushrooms and legumes. A moderate amount of animal products tend to minimize red meat consumption, tend to have higher levels of fish and seafood in their diets, and so on. So Mediterranean diet is fantastic. We at Novos have made some slight modifications to that diet to make it even more purposefully focused on slowing down the aging process. So we call that the Novos Longevity Diet that you can find at novoslabs.com/diet. But it's just a few tweaks to it. The Mediterranean diet at its core is the best diet to follow. And then the question of how much to eat also comes into play. So you don't want to overindulge and eat a hypercaloric diet, in other words, more calories than you're burning, which leads to weight gain. I would say it's less likely to happen on the Mediterranean diet than like a standard American diet where you're eating processed, hyper-palatable foods. But with that said, it can still happen with Mediterranean. So if you try to eat in a slight caloric deficit, like maybe 10% fewer calories than you would otherwise consume or 5% fewer calories, that's very helpful. And that can actually be assisted by things like intermittent fasting, where you're eating, in a 16-8, right? Like maybe 16 hours you're not eating, and then 8 hours maybe from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. or from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. If you eat in that smaller eating window, people naturally tend to end up eating a little bit less food, which is good for you.
Yeah, I've been doing that, Chris. Sometimes I'll have a couple of boiled eggs, but usually throughout the day, I just have green tea, cardamom, and I think there's one more ingredient, but I just have that throughout the day. I just sip on that and then I have a meal.
Oh, so that's great. As long as you're getting adequate protein in that meal and adequate calories, then that's great. And the fact that you're sipping on green tea and cardamom, these teas and herbs, they're very nutrient dense. And it's actually one of the adaptations we make with the Novos Longevity Diet is encouraging people to have 2, 3, 4 cups of tea a day, 1, 2, 3, up to 4 servings of coffee per day. Believe it or not, they are both tea and coffee associated with better health outcomes, better cardiovascular health, and better long-term health outcomes.
As long without sugar, right?
Yes. You want to avoid that sugar. If you have a sweet tooth, I think it's perfectly fine for you to use stevia. There's a lot of opinions on the internet about stevia, but when you look at the research, there's zero negatives to it. It does not increase insulin levels, despite what some people might claim. It actually has an antioxidant function to it. It is 100% natural. It's 0 calories, and it's super sweet. So you need very little of it. You need a small fraction of what you would need for sugar to have the same sweetness, like probably 1/100th of the amount of stevia that you would need for sugar. So it's a very small dose, but it's super sweet. And that's one way to be able to have that sweetness if you crave it.
And you also decrease your, I think it's the biological, I forgot what it's called, but the 30, I believe it's 37 age, biological age by 37%.
Yes. So let me explain a little bit about what biological age actually is, because a lot of people are making a lot of claims all over the place about biological age and reversing it. And so it's very important that we have a standard set of definitions for what biological age is. So you've got chronological age. That's how old you are. Everyone knows it. You just look at your license or your passport. And then biological age is essentially how old you are biologically. So what does that mean? There are different ways to define biological age. You can measure it in different ways by looking, for example, maybe you're looking specifically at the biological age of your heart, and maybe you are measuring that based on your, say, VO2 max. That's quite different than measuring the biological age of your heart by looking at the DNA methylation sites, in other words, the epigenome, which I mentioned earlier, which genes are turned on and off. There are patterns, and scientists have devised ways to be able to measure how old that organ is, or overall our whole body, which is like the average of all of our organs that make their cells make their way into our blood, to be able to determine how old on average our body is. So the point is that there's different ways to measure biological age. So it's important when someone's telling you their biological age that you first understand, how did they measure it? What are they basing this on? And then even within that, there's, for example, we can take blood-based epigenetic tests for the whole body. Even there are different quality tests out there with different levels of accuracy and measuring different things. So let me try to make this simple for you and your audience. So your epigenome, as I mentioned before, it's which genes are turned on and off. So if you think of your genes, it's like a piano. And then the epigenome is the piano player, or what tune is being played, what song is being played on that piano. And when you're young, it might sound like a great Tchaikovsky piece. And then as you get older, certain keys are accidentally pressed and other keys that should be pressed aren't pressed, and you don't have the rhythm perfect anymore. So things are being triggered when they shouldn't be and not being triggered when they should be. And these patterns can be detected, and then scientists can create estimates of how old you are biologically as a result of these patterns and how they trend as people get older. Now, the interesting thing is that the first generation of these clocks were trained on your chronological age, which at the time made sense because it was the first concept, the first time we were doing this. And there's a famous scientist named Steve Horvath who created that first test called the Horvath test. But ultimately, these first generation tests are most important for the sake of trying to determine how old someone is chronologically. So that makes sense, for example, at a crime scene. Maybe there was a homicide and you have the blood of the killer and you want to estimate how old that person was, right, as a clue. For us, what's the point? We don't need that. We can just look at our license or our birth certificate, right? So then the second generation test trained it on morbidity, so that's illness, and mortality, so death of people, and then looked at the different epigenetic signatures across these people, and were able to build algorithms that would predict the likelihood of you getting an illness, which again, the point I raised earlier, your chances of illness increase as you age. And then finally, there are third generation tests that measure how quickly you're aging, how fast or slow. And these are the most accurate and precise of the tests out there. And there are companies out there still selling those first generation tests. Many of them are doing it based on saliva, which is not as accurate as blood. And they're not very useful. The tests that I've run on myself are predominantly second and third generation tests more than a dozen of them. And overall, the results find that I average in my mid to late 20s. I'm going to be 40 in a week from now. That's a significant reduction of more than 30%. And my pace of aging, which is the third generation test I mentioned, is 31% slower than the average person. So for every 1 year, I'm aging about 3.5 months less than the average person would, based on the lifestyle I'm following and the supplements I take and so on, all add up to this. And we have customers of ours who are doing even better than I am at this point, who are being written about in Forbes and Fortune magazine and so on for their accomplishment.
So can these tests be done by your family doctor, or you have to go to a specialist?
No, you don't have to go to a specialist. So we actually offer these, at least the third generation, the most accurate of the tests.
Good.
We license it from Columbia and Duke universities, and the analysis is done at a third-party lab. So we don't actually touch your blood sample, but we offer it to our customers, largely because we want, first of all, people to have a scale, so to speak, to make sure that they're trending in the right direction. Also for people to find out for themselves that our products are working for them. So we offer those. Yeah, we offer those for people.
Yeah. In your research, have they looked at meditation, more of the mind-related work that individuals do? There's so many people that live over 100 that consistently, religiously meditate, and they're strong, they're healthy, they're fit. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so researchers have looked into that, not our specific scientists, but researchers have. And whether it be meditation or prayer or journaling, all of these different practices have similar outcomes, similar results. And the expectation is that what's actually happening is that people who are better able to manage their stress, they actually have physiological effects on themselves, right? Like when you are very stressed, your blood vessels constrict, your blood pressure goes up, your body releases inflammatory molecules, and it literally does accelerate aging. Scientists have recently found out that the old tale of your hair graying based on stress actually is true, that your hair can gray based on stress. And then when that stress it's not a myth. And then reducing that stress can actually then reduce those grays back to having melanin or the color in them again. So stress definitely has a physiological effect on all of us. So that's one thing. And the second thing I would say is purpose. I think when you are journaling, when you're praying, when you're meditating, you can actually find your inner purpose more, and you have more of an inner drive. And having that drive, that thing to live for, to take what Viktor Frankl shared in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. The people in the Holocaust who actually survived were those who had a reason to survive, right? And that's a little bit poetic or analogous to what's actually happening within our biology. When you have that purpose, you have a drive to keep going, and studies have found better outcomes for people who have purpose.
It's like cheating death when you have goals, going after something. Yeah.
Yes.
Are there any practical suggestions or strategies you can share with us that could help someone start taking some steps to make changes in their life other than what we talked about?
Sure. So 2 suggestions. First of all, I have a blog called Slow My Age, slowmyage.com, where I share my personal results as well as my lifestyle on there. It's a little bit more sophisticated and geeky, if you will, for those who want to just dig in. But then novoslabs.com, we have hundreds of articles on our blog written by PhDs and MDs. We also have a mobile app for Android and iOS called Novos Life that has personalized recommendations for you based on your lifestyle and how you answer survey questions. We haven't officially announced this yet, but we will within a couple of weeks. We are including a free biological age test in that app. So it is based on AI. It is more accurate than the first generation blood test that I was mentioning before. It's not as accurate as our blood test, but it is still quite accurate. It was a peer-reviewed scientific study by a brilliant statistician. And we are able to offer that for free because we're a public benefit corporation and we do whatever we can to make longevity accessible and achievable for as many people as possible. So I'd say if people really want to get that perspective on longevity and what they can do for their health, they should check out the app and our website. But the quick answer is there are a number of different factors, lifestyle factors that contribute to longevity. So one, we already talked about diet, how many calories and the timing of those meals. Another is what we were just talking about, stress management. Related to stress management is relationships and having close, positive relationships with loved ones as well as with community at large. Just being social and with people has been found to increase lifespan, or it's at least associated with longer lifespans. Improving your sleep. So that's not just the duration of sleep, but the quality of that sleep. So actually having a routine, a practice every evening to wind down, dim the lights or turn them off, get away from electronic devices, have near perfect silence. So I sleep with earplugs, for example, and complete darkness. So I put a sleep mask on and get the temperature right in the room. All of these will contribute to better sleep. I actually wake up without an alarm clock because I get to sleep at the right time and I have such good quality sleep. I don't need that alarm clock. I wake up naturally. And I think that's an ideal people can work towards. Physical activity, obviously, there's different degrees of it. You don't necessarily have to go intense. If you look at the longest lived centenarians, they're not like in the gym, pumping iron. I personally do, but you don't need to do that. You just need to be physically active, moving a lot, and maintaining muscle mass so that you don't fall when you're 70 and hit your head on something and pass away from that. There's that. Then there's also making sure that you're not deficient or have any insufficiencies in any critical nutrients. That's all of the vitamins, all of the minerals. So, vitamin A, B, C, D, or the multiple Bs, C, D, E, K, the minerals like potassium and magnesium, people are particularly deficient in. And then consider longevity supplements. That's where Novos really specializes. We create them with world-renowned scientists out of Harvard and MIT. We file for patents. We do third-party studies. We've been able to show through academic labs that our products can reduce DNA damage from irradiation in vitro studies, DNA damage from chemotherapeutics, reduce what are called senescent cells, which are zombie cells. This is another hallmark or mechanism of aging. And in a case study, we were able to show that 73% of participants slowed down their pace of aging by a statistically significant amount. And it was the equivalent of more than a month per year of reduction in aging. And 0% of people accelerated their aging, despite having lifestyle stressors that you would expect some people in the cohort would have accelerated their aging, but nobody did. So that indicates the possibility of protective effects of the formulation. So that was done specifically on Novos Core and Boost. Novos Core is our flagship product. So I would say that's the quick summary of the things. But if you really want to dig in, there's a lot more to it. And we even get into the ways that, for example, oral hygiene can impact your risk of Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease. So things that you might not think of, they're not apparent or obvious. We dig into that research and we make those recommendations to you as well.
Very good, Chris. Thank you so much. You added a lot of value today. I'm sure it's going to help people. The big part of what I'm hearing with these strategies is you can live longer with the right mindset as well.
100%. And what most people don't understand, but then when you think about it logically, it makes perfect sense. You can slow down your rate of aging. If you think of a cigarette smoker, they're accelerating their aging. And if you think of somebody who eats a healthy, balanced diet and doesn't have a stressful life, they live longer and they look younger because they have slowed down their aging. So it's about learning what is going to accelerate and decelerate aging, and then applying what you can to your life to be what we like to say at Novos, be younger for longer.
I love it. Be younger for longer. That's awesome. I love it, man. Thank you so much, Chris. It was awesome talking to you today. I was very excited to learn more, and I'm sure people in the audience are going to find it valuable as well. And you offered some guidance with the blog and the app. And that's definitely going to get people in the right direction, because it's not just about looking prettier longer. It's about your being there for your families, being there for your business longer. So you definitely helped us.
That's what I'm hoping to do, is to help people to live healthier, longer lives and reduce the suffering in this world. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you so much.